Well, hello to all of my methodical researchers out there. This video is a tutorial showing my approach to your Module 3 assignment on statutory research that I've got pulled up here. And it's really pretty similar to what I did for you guys last time, and you'll want to similarly follow along on your own completed assignment as I go along. So question 1 is optional, but it actually is a really good idea to consult a secondary source because this is a really tough area of the law to understand. I also would like you to get used to thinking of these assignments as part of an overall legal research process, even if each one only directly assesses just one part of that process. So even though this particular assignment is focused on researching codified law, statutory research, a part of codified law, a type of codified law, it will be helpful to you if you visualize it within the context of that bigger overall process. Now, if you had chosen to consult a secondary source here for question 1, there are any number of really solid choices out there. You would want to go with a legal encyclopedia or a treatise because this is for preliminary analysis purposes. And you would also want that source, whichever one you choose, to have good coverage of federal law, since asylum law is covered by the federal law. But aside from those two considerations, there are really a real variety of sources out there that could be helpful. A legal encyclopedia like Amjur here would give you a great overview of this complex topic, this complex area of law that might serve as an especially useful introduction. And there is a chapter on asylum. And within this chapter, many sections could potentially be helpful, although you'd probably want to start with this generally section that I have here pulled up. Now, the most authoritative treatise is this one, Immigration Law, Practice, and Procedure. You can find it on Lexis. Now, it's really probably overkill for what I'm asking you to do in this particular problem on this assignment. But if I were actually researching a real asylum case, this is what I would want to look at. Question 2 here gives you the statutory section of the U.S. Code on Asylum. It then asks you when it was last amended. So you just copy and paste the code citation into Westlaw. It should retrieve the source just like it did here. And to find out when this statutory section was last amended, you would just scroll past the statutory text until it is a long one, until you get to the credits section, which is called History on Lexis. And then you'll just find the date for the amendment that's listed last. So December 23rd, 2008. Question 3 asks us to find a bill that proposes to amend this particular statutory section. And if there is such a bill, you will see a yellow key cite flag at the top of the statute that says proposed legislation. And if you click on the key cite flag, it'll take you to this validity section of the history tab. And we can see that there are actually several pieces of proposed legislation, several bills that would amend this particular statutory section on asylum. And you could really choose any one of these. I just chose the first one, and that was my answer. Now, this is something that might be less important if you were researching for litigation, but more important if you were advising a client about the future. Question 4 asks us to situate this section within the overall statutory structure. And because codified law is topically organized, doing this can help to give us some insight into the meaning of this section, in addition to helping us perhaps find some of those important related sections of the same statute. So to do that, just want to go back to the statutory section. And then click on Table of Contents. Now the titles, as I've mentioned before, are the biggest subdivisions of a statutory code. And this is in the Aliens and Nationality title, Title 8. And the chapter here would be Immigration and Nationality, which makes sense, right? Now, if we were researching this, in reality, if this were like a real case that we had, we would probably also want to browse all of these other sections of this chapter to see if any of them cover like important related legal issues. Question 5 asks us to just to basically make sense of this one subsection on eligibility. And really, just basic comprehension can be pretty difficult with the way that many statutes are written, especially complex statutes like this one. And my recommendation here is that you just take it slow and pay attention to your subjects, pay attention to your verbs. It can also be helpful to think of this language that requires, what needs to be done to satisfy this eligibility definition. It's being like a series of elements that need to be met, because even though the concept might be more sophisticated, it's really not analytically all that different than like the different torts that we've done in other assignments. Here, if we just take our time and parse this eligibility section, we can see that there are really two basic, conditions that need to be met for our client to be eligible. First, she has to apply according to the procedures for asylum applications. And second, she has to meet the definition of refugee, which is actually contained in another section of this statute, as we can see. So question 6 here directs us to that other section of the statute. And when one section of a statute references another section of the code, it's called a cross-reference. And it's really common, so you need to be familiar with that idea. Here, the cross-reference directs us to the statutory definitions for the immigration statute. And it's helpfully hyperlinked by Westlaw here, so we can just open it in a new tab. And here we go. This is the definition of refugee that our client would need to satisfy in order to be eligible for asylum. There are several ways to meet the definition of a refugee that are listed out in this statute. Our client is part of an opposition political party. So this part of it on political persecution persecution on account of political opinion that you see here, that one seems like it would be the most likely to be applicable to her situation, although we would probably need to research it more just to make sure. And here's the answer to question 6, clearly displayed for you guys. Now on to question 7. And question 7 asks you to go back to the asylum statute and find a subsection that discusses the burden of proof. And when a statute, specifically, spells out a procedural aspect like this, you really do need to be aware of it. It is important also to recognize that sometimes you're going to find procedures and definitions and the like over like in a separate section of the statute, but sometimes there'll be different subsections of the same section that contain these different statutory structures that you encounter so often, like they are here. And it's also important that you get all of the different ingredients of the citation correct. This is just such a long citation, and it can be easy to lose track of, all of these different numbers and letters. And we can find that subsection on burden of proof, conveniently just right below that section on eligibility that we were just looking at. And for the second part of question 7, you similarly want to be aware of it when the statute directs an agency or the head of an agency to promulgate procedures or to otherwise regulate under the statute. And really the best way to approach that second part of question 7 is really to just browse. If we just keep browsing here, we see a subsection on asylum procedure, which sounds like it's basically exactly what we're looking for. And just based on this first subsection of that subsection, it looks like the Attorney General is going to be the person tasked with promulgating the procedures for deciding these asylum applications. Now, obviously, if this was an actual case that you were researching for, you would need to find those procedures. It's going to be pretty important. And question 8. Question 8 asks us to find the subsection of that statutory section that contains exceptions. And you are always going to want to actively seek out definitions, like the definition of refugee from our earlier questions. And you'll also going to want to actively seek out exceptions in the same way. They're just a really common feature of statutes that you need to be on the lookout for. And here we'll just browse this long, complicated statutory section until we find the subsection that is entitled exceptions. Here we go. And if we read over these, just based on what we know based on our fact pattern, these don't actually seem to be applicable here, although for some of them we just don't have a lot of related facts to make a knowledgeable determination. And question 9, our final question. Question 9 asks us to find a relevant, factually similar case using the statutory annotations. And those statutory annotations are under notes of decisions, as you know. Now, this particular statutory section just covers so many legal issues and has so many interpretive cases with their own annotations that we pretty much have to use this table of contents on the sidebar here to navigate them. Okay, persecution. We want political persecution. Persecution due to political opinion, rather. We see here. And further aspects of it listed in your subsequent little sections here. And under this, political opinion, persecution for political opinion topic, you really just need to browse until you find something that seems relevant or that seems similar. There's really not a shortcut, or rather the annotations are the shortcut. You don't have to read all of the cases. You can just read, the summaries for each one of them that are in the annotations, which really saves you a lot of time while making sure that you don't miss anything that's too important. And there are really any number of choices that you could make here. I personally like this one that I found under applications where asylum was ultimately granted that I found based on political opinion. Here we go. And the reason I like this one is just because it is the same country. It also deals with Cameroon, just like our fact pattern, and some aspects of its factual scenario are kind of similar. There is detention and beating by the authorities involved. There is arrest involved, potentially connected to the applicant's political views that were able to demonstrate past persecution for the purposes of being eligible for asylum. Now, there are some things that aren't, precisely similar, like there is, no attempt to get like this applicant for this particular case to like renounce his political views like you saw in our fact pattern. But it's not like you're looking for like a one-to-one similarity on every aspect of the facts. You're just trying to find something that's really a good fit for at least one distinct legal issue. And that's really it. The key to statutory research is usually going to be, number one, comprehending the statutory language itself. And then number two, making sure to use the topical organization of the statutory code to your advantage by browsing those nearby sections and subsections for additional relevant statutory law. The same strategies that work with the Georgia Code to research our kind of basic tort law are also going to work with the federal code on this just extremely complex topic of asylum. So yeah, this assignment was a considerable step up in difficulty from your last assignment. So if you didn't do as well as maybe you'd hoped, don't get discouraged. And conversely, if you did do really well, make sure to give yourself a good pat on the back. Okay, that's all I have for now. Until next time.